Hey, good morning, Jeff Fuller with you. Setup's a little bit different. Hopefully, that does not bother you whatsoever. But my name is Jeff Fuller, J Fuller Interviews on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, the YouTube channel, J Fuller Interviews. And now, the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of J Fuller Interviews on Apple iTunes and Google Podcasts. I believe people's stories matter, they make a difference, and sometimes we need to stop, listen, and learn so we can unlearn what we thought was right to relearn what is right. And I'm going to butcher this poor gentleman's name, so I will call him Mr. Olagumi. Welcome in. How'd I do with that pronunciation?
You were close, but listen, I'm from Louisiana, and I've heard so many pronunciations of my name. It's not even funny. So my name is pronounced Olaolu Ogunyemi, and I'm glad we have it phonetically spelled there because like I said, some people we tend to butcher it. But most people call me Lou. In the Marine Corps, as you'll see, they call me OG. So. I've go by many aliases, but yeah, that's how you actually pronounce it as a spell.
Well, thank you so much, and I should have put that up before I tried to pronounce it. But thanks for making the time. We have a mutual friend, at least on Facebook, and I was able to appear on his podcast. He came on mine. That being Chip Baker. Go get it.
Yeah.
How did you first come in contact with Chip?
So first of all, Chip is a great guy. I love what he's doing. Every time I see him, he's speaking to teenagers, he's speaking to children, and he's really just trying to motivate them. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I met him through my oldest brother, Dr. Clement Ogunyemi. I don't even know how they met or where they met, but they crossed paths. And my oldest brother said, I wanted to go on his show. And he went on the show and he talked about his finance and what he does. And then from there, my oldest brother said, hey, I have brothers and they all go in different, they have different professions and different things that they do. So Chip was like, yo, bring them on, go get it. You know how Chip.
That's great. Yeah.
He's one of those guys, he's like, bring them on. And we came on and we had a great time. And from there, the relationship just grew. I think that was about, 3 or 4 years ago. And then from there, the relationship just grew.
And Chip is part of a book, The Work, The Impact of Influence. And I think that really explains him and has opened doors, but that's who he's been for a while, just sharing that message of hope and inspiration with others. Mm-hmm. For you, I do want to say sincerely, thank you for your service, your military service. And backing up, did you grow up always wanting to be in the military, or what kind of drew you or led you into that field of work?
I did. So it's funny because I actually grew up just I wanted to join from when I was little, but to be completely honest with you, a lot of people looked at it as a last resort. They didn't look at it as a real career path. It's more of a, hey, you go there, you're going to be front lines, especially because I'm in the Marine Corps. You're going to go to the front lines. You're going to do this. You're going to do that, and all these preconceived notions that people had sort of discouraged me and sort of had me, sort of swaying until I got to college, and I was sort of sitting in my bedroom. And I realized that, as I'm sitting there, I'm paying my own bills at that point and everything else is going on. I'm like, well, I can make my own decisions. And I think I will say I'm pretty sure I shocked my parents, specifically my mom. I think my dad initially was shocked and then he sort of started understanding a little bit because, dads tend to sort of understand where sons are coming from at different points. My mom, I'm willing to bet. She was very supportive up front. But I could tell she was very, very disturbed by my decision. But it was something I wanted to do, and since I've joined, I actually joined in 2011, and since then, I've learned so much. I've met some great people. I've had an opportunity to travel different places and meet wonderful people and work with some really intelligent and just outstanding people. So yeah, it's just a blessing to be able to serve.
Now, Lou, you said that you grew up in Louisiana, but your name does not sound very Louisianian. What is your family heritage?
So my dad is actually from Nigeria. He came over for college. And I like to I'm poke fun of him because he actually came over to be a neurologist initially. And when he made it over to the United States, obviously he didn't stick to that. He sort of transitioned to another career path. So it was just fun, just seeing how his career path went out, and it's just different for him.
So Lou, I can still hear you. It looks like we lost the video, but just thinking about your family, Could you just share a little bit about what it was like to grow up? Where were you in the birth order? And I think we may have missed Lou. If you are still watching, it's Olaolu. Olaolu. That's easy. Olaolu Ogunyemi.
Yes, sir, it is.
Olaolu
I'm gonna
Ogunyemi.
get this.
Excellent.
I'm gonna get this camera working, and technology tends to do whatever it wants to do. And I want to just give the disclaimer that I am a computer information systems. That's what I got my degree in. But obviously, I am not doing as well as I probably should do with the cameras and things at this point. I think it's trying to connect to my other camera, and for some reason, it's not picking up my computer camera.
Oh
So
man, no worries. That'll happen. My brother calls me an Eron, an electronic moron. 'Cause, if I can figure it out, it's fine. But if it's something new, I kind of struggle. But
yeah.
So, Olu, as we talk about this, I just asked, what is your birth order as far as you said you have brothers? Do you have multiple siblings?
I do, yes. So I'm actually the fifth of six children.
Wow.
So I am so let's see, there's four boys. And I am the second to last boy. I like to consider myself the favorite, although my little brother, he would always disagree, I'm sure. He'll tell you that, oh no, it's me. But realistically, we know that, the second to last is always the favorite. The last is usually the one that, I like to call him the runt, although he's 6'3", he's a pretty big guy. But I still call him the runt. So it's two girls, two older sisters, and then three boys.
Wow. Now, how many of you have been part of the military? Is it just yourself?
It is. So it's only me. And I think that shared some of the emotions from my parents when they realized that I am the only one that wanted to serve, not knowing what the career path looked like. So I got my camera back.
I see you back. You looking good. Yeah.
But it was one of those things that I was the first one. And then I decided to join the Marine Corps, which wasn't very popular choice in my area. There's a lot of Army influence back in Ruston, Louisiana. Even the university I was at Grambling State University, had Army ROTC. So everybody was wondering, where in the world did you find the Marine Corps and why? So yeah, I was the first one, and so far I'm the only one. I'm still working on a few on my siblings, but I don't think they're believing me.
Well, I have to just bring up that it's been kind of a scary time for what's taking place around the world, and for you, your military service just means so much. But as you mentioned, you've been able to travel and be a part of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Where does service usurp being nervous? When did you figure out, like, I'm here because I want to be here, it's my duty, but I could put my own self on the back burner for the sake of others?
I think so. What's interesting, and I think I recognized that when I was at OCS, Officer Candidate School, which was pretty early, because I realized that the Marine Corps is all about, and military service and military in general, it's all about looking out, not for yourself, but looking out for the person to your left or right. And to be an officer in the military, that's even, it's times 10, because what they're always telling you from the beginning is your job is to bring that 19-year-old, the 18-year-old, that 20, that 40-year-old, your job is to bring them back home, right? Bring them back to their families. America entrusted them to you, and now your job is to bring them back. And when I realized that, like I said, I think I had that realization when I was an officer candidate school, and I was like, man, when I graduate college, at the time I was still in college, and I was thinking, man, when I graduate college, I immediately become in charge or responsible for people, and not just the people that I bring into this world, or
Right.
not the people that I parent, but these are people, real lives that are going into real danger. And it really had a sobering effect for me. It made me really consider what I was doing, and it makes me really take it seriously. It makes me really study hard. It makes me really work out hard. It makes me really try to understand the Marines I'm leading, or the sailors that I may lead. It makes me really try to understand what they're going through and understand their background and all those things. And I think that moment happened, and I believe the military does a good job of preparing you for those other things that you may encounter in the future. I don't think there's any way to completely prepare for it. And I don't think a veteran would disagree with me. But at least I think that they do what they can to prepare you for those moments.
I'd like to press into that a little bit more. I finished the book, The Motive by Patrick Lencioni, and he talks a lot about servant leadership, but it's really just leadership. And then Damon West had opportunity to interview him. Excellent story Damon has, but he just talks about people that lead need to learn that they're serving first and the importance of servant leadership. Did that come naturally from watching your parents, or before your officer training school? When did you really learn the importance of serving others?
So I will say that definitely came from my parents, my upbringing in the church, because I am Christian, and that's not to say that's not to detract from anyone else's religion, but I'm personally a Christian, and my parents really instilled in me the importance of being a servant first. Always learning using the parable of washing feet, using all those kind of things that we understood as children to say, okay, this is what you should be as a leader. You should be serving others. You are designed to serve others. And then my parents, they you look at their lives, and I sort of alluded to my dad's transition from Nigeria to the United States earlier. I mean, he came to be a neurologist, and he ended up being a college professor, and he's teaching education. But I think that kind of thing happened. It happened because of the family, right? He made that sacrifice for the family. He was doing that to serve the family. And the same thing with my mom. She actually got her master's in speech language pathology. But then she decided to put all that to the side for the family, to serve the family, ensure that, we have the best, or at least the best that they could afford at the time. Ensure that we had a good upbringing, ensure that we loved each other, and ensure that we had the love and care. So that kind of leadership was always instilled in us from a younger age. And then when you join the military, I think that just sort of reinforced the importance of that servant leadership, because you walk into certain situations, and I think one thing that the Marine Corps says that I take to heart, I really believe in, is that you shouldn't ask anybody to do something that you wouldn't do yourself. Yeah. And I think once you have that in your mind, that sort of, no matter what situation you're in, that kind of mentality will take you very, very far, because that shows you that, hey, if I'm here to serve, and if I know that I'm not a dictator, I know I'm not going to tell them to do something that I wouldn't do. I think that just sort of embodies what it means to be a leader.
And then I have a question that we kind of spoke to off air, but I don't know if we can solve within the next 30 minutes that we're speaking. But I grew up a loud and proud American. I went to college in Canada, and I was that student that hung the American flag out of the window. But I think there's something about being a Christian that comes before being an American. However, as you just described it, being in the service, servant leadership. What if we were known for serving and caring for one another versus, what line we stand on or how we vote? The question in that is, looking at your dad and how he has been successful here in America when he did not grow up here. How do you think we can learn from your own dad and seeing some of the trials that he's had to go through, but the benefit of grit and resilience?
Absolutely. So that, when I think about that, I always think about, okay, what were the things that he had to overcome? What were the obstacles? What was that? Because when I think about grit and resilience, I think about things that came against you. What was the thing that came against him? So I think about the time that he came to America, which was the 70s. I think about the place, which I told you, I joke, I always poke fun of him. I joke about him because he actually came to Birmingham, Alabama in the 70s from Nigeria, and he didn't speak very good English. And at the time that there was a lot of tension. So what made him do that, and what made him push past it? And I think that's where I believe that's where our higher calling comes into play, right? Because we have a message of higher hope. So we believe, right? And that's just to speak to any spirituality. And we do that in Marine Corps. We talk about spiritual fitness and why that's important. Because no matter what your belief is, you have to believe in something higher than yourself. Yeah. Because that's what pushes you to extend beyond. That's what gives you that resilience that you have. For my father, that was Christianity. So he believed that if he continues to do this, then this would happen. If he continues to work hard, then he will have results. If he continues to sow, then he will reap. And those are the kind of things that sort of just having that hope, no matter how small it may have seemed, No matter when, he was a track runner, he injured himself pretty significantly in a car accident. And it's like, okay, he was using track to pay for college, right? And then he injured himself. All the other things he was using to pay for college, whether it's raking leaves, cutting grass, cutting hair, right? All those are physical in nature. So you injure yourself in the 70s in Birmingham, Alabama, you obviously now have yourself a bit of a conundrum. So having that ability to look past the things that are currently in front of you and look and say, I have hope. I have something that I can believe in that's larger than myself. I can invest in something that's larger than myself, I think is the key to being resilient and having that grit to really overcome adversity.
So good. Olaolu Ogunyemi making some time for us. And I apologize to the YouTube watchers that I don't have my share screen set up very well. But can you just talk about your new book, Crow from the Shadow? And I don't have a picture of it, but people can certainly find that. What made you want to write this book? And bring that forward and put that in front of the camera. Crow from the Shadow. Talk to me about this story.
All right, so this story is a children's book, and I'll start off with the series that we created. So the first thing is we created what's called the Parent-Child Connect series, and the purpose of that, long story short, is to have resources for parents, teachers, and mentors to just create memorable moments for their children, and just make sure that while they're creating those memorable moments, they can actually have those teachable moments as well, to where they can actually invest time and their children can learn. They can understand values. They can just grow and develop. It's just trying to bring mentorship back into our homes, into our village. As we talk about, it takes a village. It's just to bring that mentorship back because what I realized is there's so many influences out there, whether it's TV, YouTube, TikTok, all these other influences that are out there, and we have a choice. Either we're going to combat it, or we're going to collaborate with those influences. And I think that, providing these resources gives us that choice. So Crow from the Shadow was the first book I released, and I'm actually in the process of releasing another one that's for the younger readers later this month. But Crow from the Shadow was the first. And the message is pretty clear. And it's on the back page. It says, only one can determine my future, and that one is me. And the purpose of that is, as he goes through the story, Crow is just a character. I know a lot of people ask why I chose a crow, and there's many ways I can go with that, but I'll just stick to the theme here. So Crow goes through the story as he says, I love to play sports, but the shadow tells me I can't do it. I said, I have this dream that I can protect and serve, but the shadow told me I will never overcome this. I can make an A, but the shadow told me that A's aren't the right way. So what I wanted to do with Crow from the Shadow is I wanted to expose the shadow, right? Whatever that shadow may be. But for everybody in general, the shadow is whatever or whoever is giving you myths and fallacies, feeding you those myths and fallacies, those lies that stop you from being successful. So I took that message that says, okay, we have all these myths and fallacies. We have this big shadow that's casted over our lives that legitimately will tell us that you cannot do something for whatever reason. There's always a reason that you can't do it. And then you get to the end and you realize, wait a minute, as you go throughout the story, it starts off fairly dark in the imaging. And this is intentionally done. My illustrator is my brother, Joshua. Awesome. Intentionally, it starts off pretty dark and it talks about Crow and he's introducing himself and, what the shadow is all about, how the shadow is telling him what to do. And then you get to the end and you see it's really bright when it gets to the end. And it's showing, hey, you know what? Crow just realized that he has the power to determine his future, right? And I think that's really the message that we're trying to convey to children and really just to people in general, that you have the power within to overcome those myths and fallacies that may have been casted over your lives. So really, I think that's my 2-minute spiel or 3-minute, however long it was for Crow for the Shadow.
Well, Lou, thanks so much for sharing. And listeners or watchers, you can find more at parent-child-connect.com. That's parent-child-connect.com. And you can get a copy of Crow from the Shadow right there. But Lou, I'm just thinking about you with a family, being married, having children, and then writing a children's book. Where did you find the time to do that? Was that a dream? Did your wife really push you to do that? Or was that just kind of a side hustle that you just were gritty enough to accomplish?
So it's funny because a lot of people ask me where do I find the time, and I have to give credit to my wife. She does an excellent job. I mean, when I told her I was going to write a children's book, I think I wish I could remember what she said verbatim, but it probably wasn't the most encouraging message. It was probably like, "Excuse me, like when when do you have time for that?" And I want to encourage people in that moment because a lot of the time that I was able to do it was while I was driving. I wrote. I know it sounds counterintuitive, and no, I'm not encouraging people to look down and write while you're driving. But you use your phone. You take out your phone, you hit the record button, and you just start talking. Unload everything from your mind into your phone, right? And we even have voice to text now. That's another feature I use.
Yeah.
Once I started, the idea became a little more firm for this story and others. I started using voice to speech, and so while I'm driving, and at the time I had a pretty decent commute. But while I was driving, instead of just listen to music or just listen to podcasts like I did, I was like, you know what? Let me start getting this idea from my head onto paper, which in that form was electronic. So I used time. I think I used the time that was normally spent doing other things, by taking more time away from family. Of course, yeah. When I get home from work, there's going to be times, especially after you publish, which I've learned very quickly. After you publish, it does take a lot of time to really market and all those kind of things, and unless you choose a marketing firm. But I will say that you just have to sometimes you use that time, whether it's on the treadmill or on the stationary bike or in your car, whatever those times are that you could be focused on just running, or you could just be focused on biking, or you can read while you're biking, all those kind of things, or you can just pull out your phone and start jotting down some ideas. I think that's the first thing, considering time. And then secondly, I think my true motivation for writing the story is I had a daughter, right? I had a daughter at a fairly young age, right? And I like to tell the story in full transparency, because by the time I graduated from college, I was married with a 3-year-old at the age of 22. Wow. And most people would probably say, "Woo, that's a handful." And it was, and it was a 3-year-old girl. And I just knew I was going to have all boys. I don't know why I thought that, but for some reason I was convinced that my genes are going to, we just have that gene to have boys. I don't know. I have 2 girls. So obviously I was completely wrong in science. Science was not on my side. But what I realized is that, in order for me to understand and really connect with my daughter, I can't do the same thing that I did with my 3 other brothers growing up. And my sisters one of my sisters is 14 years older and others 12. So they're older. So they took on more of a mentor role. And actually my oldest sister was almost like, the second mom for us. So they're a little older. Right. So my interaction with I didn't have a sister. I just had brothers. And the way that we collide and interacted, it could not by any means be the same way I led my daughter. So I realized that if I have that struggle, there's probably thousands, if not millions out there that are just like me. They're sitting there like, okay, what do I do? How in the world do I connect to this child? And then in that you say, okay, well, you know what? What I used to do is go in the rooms and I would just make up stories, or I'll just pick up a book and read to them, and we'll just interact in that manner. And I was like, well, you know what? This is, I love Dr. Seuss, and I love all these great Marilyn Sadler and all these great, writers and authors that I grew up on. And I was like, you know what? What will stop me from creating a book, that my children can be proud of when they get older? So I think that's where that was the origin of that. As I started think through that idea, think through that thought process, I thought it was like, oh, yeah, I think this is a great opportunity just to, get something out there to help parents like me and to give my children something to be proud of.
And again, it's Lou Ogunyemi, making some time, parent-child-connect.com. That's parent-child-connect.com. You can find the book Crow from the Shadow. And I want to say congratulations to your eldest who just turned 12. But what are you doing to build that relationship with your daughter? And of course, being proud of her father, being an author, reading books is tremendous. But I've found, as my son's 19, daughter's 17, I don't read to them anymore. So it really is the interactions. And my daughter just started CrossFit And I used to like to work out, but now because I'm old and injured or just plain lazy, she's doing things that I can barely keep up with my 17-year-old daughter, but it's a hobby that she enjoys. So I try to do my best. What are some hobbies that you enjoy doing with your wife, but also with your children?
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned it. And I look at CrossFitters, and God bless them, man. CrossFitters are just a different breed. I've tried
Amen.
my form of CrossFit, and I was like, whoo, that is a workout. That is high intensity training. Whew, they got it. But what I do. One of the biggest hobbies that my daughter has, I just had to start. Like I said, there's influences. You can either collaborate or you can combat them, and really combating them sometimes doesn't present the best solution. So, I mean, one of her biggest things, she loves dancing, right? And anybody that knows you or knows me will tell you that I am nowhere near the dancer, but somehow I've become a dancer. I mean, I will dance all day long, and we'll just have a good time. So I don't read books with her because now she's in chapter books, and she's reading she's sixth grade now, so it's a little different. But it's just funny because I will get with her and dance at any time. If she wants to go outside and swing, I'll go swing with her. If she wants to go, she doesn't do many workouts. She doesn't do workouts, thank God, because CrossFit. Again, but if she wants to skateboard, she can skateboard circles around me. Yesterday, I jumped on a skateboard because she was doing it so well, and I was like, you know what? Give me that skateboard. Let's see what I can do. And I'm glad I was able to make it to this podcast today because I thought I thought that was the end for me. So I grabbed the scooter when I could do it. I sort of got outside. So it's just finding those things, like you said, like you already alluded to, just find those things, just enjoy with them. I just watch what they enjoy doing, and I'll jump on with them. I may not get on the same games that they do, or I know some parents get on video games, and that's great. I personally, now that's the thing I haven't dedicated time to. But when they call me and say, hey, look at this, I built this house in this game, whatever game it may be, I'll sit down with them and I'll walk through the house with them. I'm like, oh man, that's really nice. Yeah. Oh, maybe if you put your TV here to there, it may not mean much at the moment, but I feel like that's the time that they're invested. And I look back to my dad, even now. I went home to visit this past summer, and my dad says, hey, I want to charge the battery for the lawnmower. And we walk outside and we hook the battery up just like normal. And he said, yeah, I know I could have done that myself, but I wanted to spend some time with myself. Yeah. And that's the kind of things that my parents always did. They always invested that time, no matter how big or small it was. They always found things to invest time with. And the same thing with my wife is just enjoying those. She loves shopping. She loves thrifting, and she's really good at it. She's found a way to when she thrifts, she finds great finds, and sometimes she puts them around the house. Like, my setup here, obviously I had nothing to do with this. My setup probably would be just, I don't know.
Like this. It'd be like this. It's a blank wall.
You're right. It would have been exactly like that. You can look at some podcasts in the past and you will see exactly that. She did this kind of setup, and everything that she purchases is through thrift findings. And so it's just getting involved with that and understanding and just spending time in the things that they enjoy.
So good. I was reminded too, and as a pastor, somebody shared the gift of presence, just being there and being with, and that's sometimes with our kids and even our spouses. That means so much. It's just being with them. I just wanted to go back to a podcast that you appeared on, and I believe the conversation had to do with money, with finances. Here it is, right here. Why did you share about money? And I've heard that, money is one of the greatest causes for divorce, and certainly money within a personal budget is so important that people understand. I guess the first question is, why do people not understand the value or the time or the responsibility of money?
I think with that, what I always think about is it's just what we believe. So, for example, when I was at home, there are certain things that we used to just think were valuable. When I went to school, although I had shoes with closed toe and I had clothes that fit, I would see somebody else with a pair of Jordans, for example. And this is not a knock on Jordans. I think they're really nice shoes. But I'll see somebody with a pair of Jordans, and I'm like, man, I want those. Those are nice. Yeah. And I'll see these things, and I really want these things, and that just becomes who we are. it becomes like that becomes our rat. They call it the rat race for a reason, right? That becomes what we always want something, so we can take and sort of bring it back to ourselves, and then that's what validates us, if you will. And I think that's where we have to start when we're talking about finance. What do we have that validates us? What makes you you? And if that is things, then you're going to tend, in my opinion, you will tend to have problems with money. Because if you always have to have the next thing to validate yourself, or somebody's opinion of how you look or how what you have is the thing that's priority in your life, then you're going to tend to spend, and not have good balance in your finances. And I really think that's why people don't. It's because we place value in the wrong things. We place our priorities, where we have material things way up here, or getting a lot of money way up here, but we don't think about impact. That's what you talked about earlier. Spending that time, we're just talking about impact and influence, right? So we're not prioritizing impact and influence. We're prioritizing how much money can we make on X product or X service. And I think that's why we don't truly. I don't know if sometimes I wonder if it's that we don't truly understand it, or we just don't truly receive it. Because we know that's the thing. We know that if we don't, save money, we won't have it to spend. Yet I think we would rather buy things sometimes, be more materialistic, than to invest or save and make sure that we have a future.
And this is Olaolu Ogunyemi. Make some time, and a few more questions, then we'll get you out. Thanks again for coming on this morning and spending time with us. The name of the website is parent-child-connect.com. That's parent-child-connect.com. I'm just thinking about you being in the military. I think about me and this is so sad that I bring it up, but I went to a small Bible college in Canada, and I played sports, which now they no longer have a sports program, and they changed the school name, so you couldn't even find it. So everybody thinks, or at least my son and daughter think, I'm making up that I played college sports. However, I remember the discipline of getting up at 5 a.m. and working out. You go to class, you go to practice, you hang out, play with your friends, pick up, and all of that. What is it? Much like money, where we should be more disciplined, is it because we don't understand the benefits of being disciplined? Or why do you think that is, where people lack that self-discipline, and maybe more when they get older and they have more time, or say over their time, that it becomes less of a reality?
I believe for discipline, I think discipline is I believe it's a learned behavior, right? And that's one thing that we always tell people. It's like, we want you to practice, you may not be perfect, but you practice striving for perfection. That's the discipline portion of it. Getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, it takes discipline to do it. And I do it every morning. And some mornings I'm like, oh gosh, why am I doing this? But it's that discipline. And really, I think it's an inability to see the larger picture. Because when you focus on what's right in front of you, I think that's where you no matter whether you think you're disciplined or not, if you don't have a long-term focus, then there's nothing that can drive you to achieve long-term goals, because you don't even know what's long-term. And I think that's really what from that perspective, I think that's where we have to learn how to take on a better perspective, and just start thinking about, okay, if I spend all my money, I mean, just down to the basics, right? This is what I teach my 12-year-old, even my 7-year-old. If I spend all my money now, then I won't have money in the future. It's just that doesn't exist. This is very, very basic way to look at it, but it's something that we have to think about. So what muscle do I need to work now? Well, I need to work the foresight muscle. I need the ability to look forward and say, okay, what do I want long term? How do I want to shape this long term? My oldest, actually, she did an excellent job. She just saved up for an iPad. Her birthday helped her out with that. But she just saved up for an iPad. And I was impressed. I really was impressed. And there's times, we had to do some rudder steering. There's times where she was like, well, if I just buy this today, I'll work harder to get that back. And I'm like, well, remember your goal. Remember your long-term goal is to buy that iPad. So continue to cut the grass, continue to do all these things that obviously we're paying her to do. But I mean, obviously I can cut my own grass, but I'm trying to help her out working that muscle.
Right.
And then she reaps the benefit of getting the iPad, which is her long-term goal. So she's learned how to save, and she learned how to delay gratification, which is another muscle that requires discipline. And she learned that, you know what, if I want the iPad, then I just have to, number one, I have to save. And number two, I have to be patient. So I really think that foresight is what feeds that discipline that we have. It's like, hey, if I get up every morning, then I'll be able to continue to work out. And maybe, my daughter turns 17. If she chooses CrossFit, I can go with it. I don't know.
And one can learn a lot from a children's book, and the name of the book is Crow from the Shadow. And I think just not listening to the shadows, but pressing through. And I encourage people to go to parent-child-connect.com to get a copy of this book. And Lou, we'll get you out in a little bit, but as you mentioned, and most all of the listeners know that I'm a pastor and I'm a Christian and all of that, but as you brought up that you're a Christian, how important did your faith play specifically for your service in the military, or continue to play? Is that something, well, reality would say, being in the military, you could die, you could give your life. Is that the main factor why your Christianity is so important to you?
Oh, absolutely. And that goes back to that servant leadership I talked about earlier. I think it's just as basic as, it says in the Bible that, there's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. I think that message right there in and of itself lets us know that we are to look out for each other, regardless of what your religion is, regardless of where you're from. Just looking out for somebody else is what makes the world a better place. When we run into situations where, where evil tends to take over good, I think those situations happen when people are selfish, when you're focused internally. And I believe that we are able to succeed. The best leaders that I've seen in the military, I can go down a list of general officers that I've had the pleasure of working for, and not just general officers, but, all the way throughout the ranks of people I've worked for and with. And I can tell you the best leaders are the ones that know the benefit of just loving people and caring for people and taking care of them. That doesn't mean taking them and being soft and not training them hard and making sure they're ready for whatever may come their way. But that does mean serving them and making sure that they have everything they need to be successful. And I think that's just, to me, that's the basic, message of Christianity, is that there is somebody who laid down in life. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, right? So that we can have a hope in the future. So as a leader, we are to follow his example. And if we have to lay down our life, no matter whether that's physically or whether that's emotionally or whether that's, even from the most practical standpoint, if we had to lay down literally, whatever we're thinking that, I have a deadline, I have to do this right now. And somebody walks in your office and says, hey, I really need to talk to you, sir. Are we willing to lay down our life in that circumstance, lay down what we're doing and prioritize that person? And I think that's really what feeds, like I said, I believe personally, that's what feeds my leadership style. I believe that, keeping Christ, I meditate every morning, I study every morning. And I believe that keeping Christ on the forefront of my mind is what really drives my ability to lead my Marines. No matter where we are in the world, or no matter what we're doing, I believe that being able to just be a servant to them and be able to teach them those same values that I learned, I think that's just that right there is in and of itself is the utmost important.
Oh, so good. So good. And thank you for sharing that. A couple questions, then we'll get you out. But sincerely, our prayers are with you and for those that you lead and being in the military. As I mentioned before, my cousin was killed in Ramadi 16 years ago. This was on the 22nd of September. We remembered that. But I'm reminded, too, that 9/11 was 20 years ago, and it brought the country together, at least for a little while. In my prayer, my question, I wonder, I think that maybe God's allowed this pandemic to bring us closer together, because we certainly need each other, but for whatever reason, it's become more polarized. You take your side, I take my side. We dig in our heels, and then we just gravitate towards people that either affirm what we say or think like us. Being Black, I think that's obvious to everybody that's listening, watching. I am Asian. I was born in Korea. I was adopted, grew up right here in Vermont. So I'm more of a Vermont redneck than I am an Asian. But I'm wondering why people would dig in and talk about our differences. Well, Jeff, you're Korean. Well, Lou, grew up in Louisiana. We bring up all of our differences instead of finding that common ground. in your mind, if we focus more on the commonalities that we have, that we share, what a what would the benefit be for us here in the United States, but for our own families as well?
Oh, I'll tell you, I've seen it happen in the smaller. I would say I will use the military for example, because I've seen it happen in a smaller, I guess, microcosm of society. In that it doesn't matter where you come from. What matters is, are you good at your job?
Yes.
Will you do what you're told when you're told to do it? And do you have the ability to critically think through things? I think those things are important, right? Because I think what happens is we become so interested in our own opinion that we fail to even listen to everybody else,
Yeah.
and we
Yeah.
refuse to listen to everybody else. So that, like you said, we just want to. All we do is gravitate towards somebody who's just going to affirm that we are right. And I think that's something that takes practice. I think it takes discipline to just go outside of your comfort zone and say, you know what? And I've personally gone to people and I've listened to them talk. And I listened to a guy, for example. He told me, he said, you know what? When I get out, when I retire, I'm going to move to a place where people look like me, because my people aren't out there looting and tearing up the city. Now, if I were the person that's going to be aggressive, digging the hills and fighting, he never would have said that to me. And number one, I never would have understood his perspective. And more importantly, he wouldn't have been able to hear another perspective, right? I was able to sit there and tell him, hey, you know what? I hear what you just said, but hey, I look like those people that you're saying are looting the city. And let me tell you, I do not have time to go out and loot anything.
Right.
Neither have I done it, right? So it's just that's not who I am, and I haven't done it. So as quickly as in your mind you form that thought, right, you didn't realize that you have a person, and multiple people actually in that circumstance, that are sitting right in front of you that have nothing to do with that, and they never have, and most likely never will. And when I said that to him, I could see the wheels turning. He's like, oh wow, cool. And we're talking about a guy who's 44 years old. So we're not talking about somebody who's 19, 18, so it's like his whole life as he's thought these things, and he's realized these certain perspectives and maybe these biases that he's had, maybe they're not the most accurate things, but that came from, number one, me listening and not digging in my heels. And as soon as he starts talking, I say, no, that's not right. And it came from him being receptive of it. And from there, we shared a moment, and now we understood each other just that much more. We grew closer. And I think that if we take that and just multiply it, I feel like there's a bright future, right? And excuse me, in that moment, that Marine and I, we actually, when we saw eye to eye at that moment, we grew closer. And when we went in to make a recommendation to the commander, now we went with a unified front. Although we didn't agree on everything, we gave him a 360 view from which he can make a decision. And I think that, to me, is the most important thing, because before, maybe we were arguing because we had differences. And then once we finally, those differences came out, we're both fully transparent and we start to understand each other as people. I think now we're able to work together, and we were able to unify and work together, regardless of whether our political opinion and all that stuff didn't even matter.
Right.
At our upbringing, I think he's from Kentucky or something like that. And it's like our upbringing and our race, none of that mattered.
Yeah.
All that mattered was how good we are at our job, and our ability to take what our experiences and what we know and just bring a good recommendation, a well-rounded recommendation to the commander so he can make a decision.
And there's that expression that there's no atheists in foxholes. And I would also say there's no racists in foxholes, because you need one another. And I think it'd be such a better place, or how God wants us to live, as long as we realize that we need each other. We need to learn from one another. We need to have that vulnerability with each other, but also the accountability. So we aren't just doing our own thing, but we're growing in love for one another and serving one another. So I guess that's my soapbox, my sermon. But Lou, thanks for making the time. As we just let you go, you mentioned that Crow from the Shadow is your first book. So that begs the question, what is the second book? When does it do well? Are some of these details just hidden and we just have to wait and see?
Oh, no, I can tell you now, because I sort of told people it's coming soon. So it's called Horus the Horsefly. And I know that sounds a little silly, right? And now I've used a crow, and now I'm using the horsefly. So I'll give the story. I'll briefly sort of tell you why, and it's pretty simple. Here in Virginia, I got sort of spoiled in California for the last 7, 8 years, right? There's not many bugs, but too many
Yeah.
are bad, and I get here to Virginia, and there seems to be this horsefly that's following me everywhere I go. I mean, he's at home with me, he followed me on a trail when I went running. He was at the track. I was like, what is going on? And then from there, I was like, you know what? Maybe this is a sign. And legitimately started thinking, and the story came to me, Horse, the horsefly. And this one is for the younger children. This is specifically for the ages 2 to 5, because it's introducing them to animal sounds, and it's introducing them to sight words like animals, cow, horse, dog, and those kind of things. So it's a very short story, and it's actually, so I'm planning on launching it on October 27th. I'm actually waiting for my physical copy to come in the mail so I can do the final approval on it, and then I can do a launch here in a couple of weeks. So that's the first one for October, and then later on in December, this one, hopefully my team doesn't beat me up for announcing this, but later on in December, I plan on releasing a second one, and it's called Billy Dipper's Time to Shine.
Awesome.
This one is about, it takes place out of space, but this one is about self-worth, and it's a fun way to tell a story about self-worth, and it also talks about bullying in there. And it's, again, the idea is that, as we sit down, the parents just reading it with their children, or a child just picks it up for themselves. They can go through the book, and then they look in the back. For the younger book, they look in the back and they see the resource of, they see a picture. What sound do I make? And you go through with your child and talk about sounds, and then you say, okay, this is a cow, and you show them the sight words. You teach them how to read. And then for the older group, that's 6 to 9, maybe 10 range, I think that can sort of, now you can go into a little bit more topics where you talk about bullying. You can ask them a simple question like, hey, what is bullying in your opinion? And have you seen it? Have you made fun of somebody? Do you believe that's bullying? What do you do? All those kind of questions. And then self-worth. What's important about it? Like, when you saw the character's self-worth, what was the most important thing that he was able to learn throughout the story? So those are two that are coming out. Again, one is for that younger age group, Horse, the horsefly. I laugh every time I say it because it sounds pretty ridiculous. Right? I think it's gonna be fun for that younger crowd. And then for the 6 to 9, maybe 10 at range, it's going to be Billy Dipper's Time to Shine. Again, number one is introducing them to that astronomy, and then number two is talking about self-worth and bullying. So exciting times between now and December.
Definitely. Congratulations. Again, parent.child-connect.com. That's parent-child-connect.com, or you can find this and so much more. But let me see if I can get this right. Olaolu Ogunyemi. Is that close enough?
All right,
man. Hey, thanks so much for making the time. We'll post this to Jay Fuller Interviews on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and then also upload as a podcast, Jay Fuller Interviews, Google Podcasts, Apple, iTunes. But we wish you all the best, and I just thank you so much for making the time. The final question I have is, for those of us that pray, that believe in God, how can we be praying for you? I mean, it seems like what you're doing for a vocation, there's stress. Being a husband is stressful. Having children is stressful. And then now with these new works, these books coming out, how can we be thinking of you, praying for you as you just go through the rest of this 2021?
Absolutely. So I think I would echo the words of Solomon. And I just say that I really want wisdom. I really want God to bless me, or to just bless me with increased wisdom. So I know, number one, how to invest the time. Number two, how to serve and lead well, not only my Marines, but my family. Number three, learn how to, as I release these resources, learn how to get it out to people at the right price point that they can afford, and all those kind of things, so that I can actually impact. Because that's really what I care about. I care about impact. Yeah. I don't really care about profit. The Marine Corps is paying me. I'm more concerned about impact, and making sure that those people, as they pick up the book, those parents pick it up, or the children pick it up, they're able to gain something from it. So I just pray that and I ask you to pray that God gives me the wisdom and to just lead well and release things that are just beneficial to families across the world.
Lou, well said. Thanks so much for making the time. We'll certainly do that, and let's keep in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's absolutely an honor.
And again, my name is Jeff Fuller, Jay Fuller Interviews, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and the Backfire podcast with Jeff Fuller of Jay Fuller Interviews on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, and Google Podcasts. We thank you all for making the time. Make sure you check out parent-child-connect.com. That's parent-child-connect.com. With that, we're out. We'll talk to you again soon.